if someone were to sit down and hear my life story, and I'm like, oh, I've always been a Christian. Have I always walked the walk? No, because I've made mistakes. And so I think sometimes it's so easy, maybe for people who are maybe looking for a reason not to follow. They'd be like, well, you made all those mistakes, so how good can it possibly be to be a Christian, right?
Yes.
And it's like, no, it's by grace I've been saved. Like, so by the grace of God, those mistakes have been used to help me point towards him.
Welcome back to the Rediscover Podcast, where we talk to people who have rediscovered their calling through the way that they have gone through their lives or the businesses that they do. And I'm here today with Stephanie Greene, certified financial planner. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I'm so happy that you're able to finally come on. It took us like forever to get it right.
I know. Schedules are hard to make a line. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Because last you were on Positivity in Practice with Megan Heritage, right?
Yep.
And I got to hear some of your story then, and I thought, I'd like to have her on here.
Yeah, I went home and told my husband, I'm like, oh, I think Wally liked my story and the change that I made in my life, and just because it's a complete 180, right? So I started as a nurse, and then I ended up in finances, which is they don't seem like they would mesh or align, but they actually kind of do, which is kind of cool.
How long were you a nurse?
I was a nurse for about a little over 2 years. So I spent some time on an adult unit in a Grand Rapids hospital, working with stroke patients and then also patients with epilepsy. And then I went over to Helen DeVos and worked in the neonatal ICU for a bit. And the NICU was supposed to be my end all be all. That's absolutely what I wanted to do. But obviously God was like, hey, here's another opportunity. Do you want to take it? And I just followed his lead, and it's been a good change.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how much schooling did you have to go through to get there?
I gave up so much. So I went to nursing school at Grand Valley, which I don't know if the standard is still this high, but basically if you didn't have a 4.0 in your undergraduate sort of classes, don't even bother applying for nursing school. Because if you don't have a 4 point, they won't even look at you. So I remember pulling all-nighters for really crazy classes. Some music class that had nothing to do with nursing school, but I knew if I didn't get an A in it, it would inhibit me from being able to help. Right. So, did a little over 4 years of both the prereqs and then nursing school, and graduated top of my class while slinging coffee here at the Starbucks in Grand Haven. So, I worked about 30 hours a week there, nursing school, clinicals, college Stephanie was purely running on adrenaline and coffee.
But you were all in though.
Oh, I was
it was all about that. Right?
Oh my gosh. And I loved it so much because I love taking care of people, and I love helping make the unknown known for people. And I think with a lot of industries and areas that if you don't have a heart for it or a heart for people and you're not able to make that connection, it's hard for people to navigate healthcare or finances, or you know what I mean? It's just, there's so much unknown and a lot of big decisions that people have to make that I want to help them bridge that gap.
Man, so when you were growing up, when you were a kid, what was it that you wanted to be?
I was a pastor's kid growing up, which is why I have an eye twitch.
Well, so do I,
but I actually wanted to be a pediatrician. I always wanted to be in the healthcare field. And when I started doing some volunteer work in high school, it was in some doctor's offices. And I realized I really wanted to be in the hospital setting. In the, I don't know what it was. I would just get so almost excited, which sounds morbid, but excited going into a hospital because I'm I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be helping people. I just got a sense for it. But as I did volunteer work in the hospitals, I realized there was such a difference with, as a provider, you're coming in, helping, and then leaving. You're not there for longer periods of time really getting to know the patients.
Right.
And so there was that, I don't want to say there is missing a human element. I don't want to, take that away from providers. But for me, I wanted more of a hands-on, really personal, get to know the patients kind of relationship. And I really found that through nursing.
Well, like the only thing I know about any of that is like Scrubs or ER or
Yeah, yeah.
and it is very like even in there, they try to have this connection, but then there's like the people are in and out and in and out
Yeah.
and in and out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny. I watch some of those medical shows with my husband and I'm like, oh yeah, that's personality of a radiologist. Or, oh yeah, that's definitely like, some of it's kind of true, but
They nail it. The way the surgeons are
pretty much.
narcissistic and
Oh God, complexes. I'm like, they're brilliant people. Like, do not get me wrong. I have so much respect, but also I'm like, you can wait a little bit for me to get back to you
Yeah.
to answer that page. You can wait.
So you're thinking you're young and you've always wanted to be there.
Yeah.
So what was it like being a pastor's kid?
Fishbowl.
Mm.
And it was interesting because I think being a pastor's kid, I feel like we go in one of two camps. Either you grow up and stay in the church or you grow up and turn your back on it. And I think it's so easy for people to look at the church and say, well, it's full of hypocrites or it's full of, people that are not making correct choices. And I was like, well, I'm a broken person and that's why I'm going to church, right? Like the church is not full of perfect people.
Right.
We're there to get to know the only one that was perfect. And so as a pastor's kid, I think it can be a little hard because, again, it's like a fishbowl, right? So like you've got the pastor's family and a lot of people think like put us on a pedestal and that's how we should model. It's like, no, I'm just a kid trying to figure it out too, right?
Yeah.
So I once had a friend who was trying to explain like how hard of a time she had with her parents. And she's like, well, you don't know what it's like to have two adults judge you your whole life. And I was like, I was a pastor's kid. I had a whole congregation. Like I know fully what it's like. But I think that, again, looking back on some of my experiences as a pastor's kid, either positive or negative, the negative ones I can look at and say, okay, those negative experiences happened because those people were hurting, And so I think it gave me a really good, I guess, like compassionate view of people. And so I kind of I took that into healthcare because when people are there and they're most vulnerable and they're most sick, it's not when people are at their best, right? Like I know I'm not at my best when I'm not feeling well. But I was just able to look at those patients with compassion and say, okay, they're scared, they're sick, their life is drastically changing. If they're a little snippy with me, okay, like I can work with that, right? Because they're going through a hard time.
So do you feel that you got that compassion for those people in healthcare because of the way you were treated when you were a kid, or not treated? I guess that's a harsh word. That sounds weird, but like just the way that the expectations you felt on yourself and the way that you saw people, and you started to more empathize or sympathize with their lives.
Yep, definitely. So, and I've always been the kind of person that, and it took me. I shouldn't say I've always been. It took me a little bit to realize that whatever my path has been, good or bad, I was meant to go through that to get me here. So I'll have people say, well, you walked away from a nursing degree, right? And I was like, yeah, I walked away from like top of my class nursing degree. But I was supposed to go through that to get me here,
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of just, I guess, respect for my path and glad that God like put me through everything he did, because again, it's who I am today. So
Well, that's really like, that's been my thing. I've been trying to, when I got rediscover the word, it had to do with, because I was planting a church, right? So we were planting like this house church, and it was right before COVID. So then that shut down for a while. Not a great time to start a church. And then I wound up going back into the church here locally, pastoring there for a while, doing like all the drive-in church and all that kind of stuff anyway, right? But when I was thinking about it, I was like, there's a lot of people that had been hurt that maybe need to rediscover what church is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's, and the way I look at it, I look at it like, okay, so from the foundations of the world, God had this whole overarching plan. And then he created us, specifically you and I, to be born at this certain time and place to then fulfill part of that plan.
Yeah.
Like we're
Doesn't
part
that
of
just blow your mind?
Yeah, it's
I
like
know.
a bigger thing, right? Like, and we have this idea of what we're supposed to do. And then where we wind up is it's like
Yeah.
winds up being a whole different thing sometimes.
Yeah. I'm going through this devotional right now that's like just reminding me that my identity is in Christ, and how, my role as a mother, heaven forbid, it might change, or as a financial advisor. Like, I don't know what God is gonna provide for me or throw at me. So whatever I believe my identity is now, it could change based on circumstances. And so I'm going through this devotional, I'm realizing like, oh, I'm putting my identity in the wrong things. Like, as important as it is for me to be, a wonderful wife and the best mom I can and really do well for my clients, my identity starts with Christ. And that's the only thing that cannot change. And that, like, just having that reminder, it just like just blew my mind. And then especially now having kids, I'm a child of God has a completely different meaning for me now.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can look at that and say, okay, like, I love my kids no matter what mistakes they make. Like, that does not change. And God feels the same for me. And that's just like very humbling. And I'm also so grateful for it because Lord knows, like, we all make mistakes, right?
Well, and then you learn how patient God was with you all your
Yes.
life, especially with me. Like, 'cause I was the worst of the worst kid, and so
No, I bet you weren't.
well, and then you get through and you realize, wow, what grace and
Oh, for
mercy.
sure.
And then you start to, okay, now how do I have that when you're frustrated because
Yep.
your child won't listen or won't do this? Like, how did he treat me?
Yeah.
Right at
Yep.
that moment, it's a whole different story because I have a 28-year-old, 23-year-old, then a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Right now.
You got the span.
Yes, yeah, I'd started all over again, and so to see them, I've gotten to see my two older boys grow through their teens, and now they're in their 20s, and how their life went, and what it was like for them. I guess me being in ministry stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Basic teen. Oh, we hate you, and now we love you, kind of
Right.
stuff like that, and the foundation that I had hoped would be there starts to blossom out later.
Yeah.
Did you find that in your life? Like,
For sure. Well, and I actually just had a conversation with somebody through our church, and she was a pastor's kid growing up, and she and I both felt the same, as that for a long time, I was like almost piggybacking on my parents' faith, right? Because like I'd have to go to church on Sundays, and then Sunday nights for youth group, and Wednesdays, and like it became just a part of my everyday that I didn't intentionally seek God out. And so when I became a mom, especially going through like really bad postpartum depression, and my first child is a little neurospicy boy, so I love that child to death. He is also a handful. He's going to do great things though. He's going to do something big with his life. But through all of that, I've really been humbled and brought to my knees, and I've realized like the reason why I've gone through that path is because now like I'm intentionally seeking that relationship with God, and it is so much better than just like going to church on Sundays and leaving, but like intentionally sitting down and having that be still and know moments with him is just like, it's so good. It's so good.
There's definitely a difference between you're just brought up in it, you're going through the motions, but at least it's all going in there.
Yep.
It's starting to settle in there. And so even if you stray for a little bit, that's what brings you back home. That's what makes you think, well, maybe I should just go home and be,
Yeah.
I had a guest on this past time, and she was talking about the military, and she's like, somebody was telling her, can you give my daughter advice? She wants to go into the military because there's a lot of benefits and there's a lot of things that could happen and all that kind of. She's like, I went through Desert Storm. She's like, I wouldn't say don't, but I say she has to be one of two kinds of people. One would be the person that's just completely lost, and maybe they need structure in their life.
Yep.
And they're young and they can do it. Or the other person is they're just all out patriot. They would die for their country. And as she was talking, it was drawing a lot of parallels for me in my mind about Christianity. And I'm like, so many times when we try to give the gospel to someone, we're giving all the benefits like it's the army commercial or something, right? And we don't tell them, this is something you are committing to in your life. You're going to give your life literally for this, right? And I wonder if that's why there are so many people that wind up being hurt in church or leaving church because they didn't really know what they were getting into to begin with, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Or and I do think like, I mean, again, if someone were to sit down and hear my life story, and I'm like, oh, I've always been a Christian. Have I always walked the walk? No, because I've made mistakes. And so I think sometimes it's so easy, maybe for people who are maybe looking for a reason not to follow. They'd be like, well, you made all those mistakes, so how good can it possibly be to be a Christian, right?
Yes.
And it's like, no, it's by grace I've been saved. Like, so by the grace of God, those mistakes have been used to help me point towards Him. You know, we've got a friend right now, and we're so close with them, and they're lovely and wonderful. But I think they've been really hurt by the church, and I understand that completely. And so I think where sometimes people get it wrong is they'll see somebody who they feel maybe they need Jesus. I feel like everyone needs Jesus,
Right,
but like
yeah.
you can look at people and be like, you need Jesus. And they go hard, right? And they're preaching from a pedestal, and it's like, no. God meets us where we're at, right? Like I gotta meet those people where they're at, show them the love of God through my experiences, like with my 5-year-old and all those dark days. This family asked me, like, how did you and your husband get through it? And I was like, honestly, it was God. And so I think some of those hard experiences too, I can use to then show like the only reason why I'm still standing here today is because God helped us through that. Right. So
That's so true. So and I've told the story before, but I'll tell it to you. I had a best friend since we were like 15, 16 years old. And he was brought up Jehovah's Witness, but he wound up atheist, like all the time I known him. By the time I met him, he was like atheist. And I wasn't really, I think I was brought up Catholic, but I hadn't really like made some decision for Christ or anything like that until I was like 19.
Yeah.
So it was hard because we were menaces together, right? So it was hard for him to see that and then believe it anyway. But then also I did the wrong thing by like, I started hanging out with him and we're back to our old ways and hanging out because we're just so close. And I made the mistake of thinking, well, I'd either like preach hard like you're saying, or I'm just hanging out with him and we're messing around and doing stupid things. And he's like, oh, well, this can't be real because you're just...
It's not making a difference in your decisions, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're the same dude, right? It wasn't until one time he moved up here, and this was back in like 2016, something like that.
Yeah.
Already. Now we're talking 20 years later, more. And he came to the church where I was pastoring, and he felt the love of the people and just the inviting, like the whole thing. Like he just suddenly he's like, I want to give my life to Christ.
Yeah.
And right on time too, because literally the next year he passed away. Like it was insane, but it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I think he needed to see that part of it instead. We would have so much fun debating, but that's not what he needed.
Right.
That's definitely not what was going to change his mind.
Yeah.
What was going to change his mind was the love.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And I'm reading through my Bible, and I'm realizing like, the best outreach I can give people is to show them like, here's what I do during hard times. Here's who I am during hard times. And just show them that outpouring of love. And then people will notice and say, where do you get that joy from? Yes. Right. Or how did you and your husband make it through this hard time? And then that's like the most beautiful moment to then witness and say, it was not me. It was all him.
Well, and that's the beauty, going back to something you said, you're glad that God put you through all these things to get to where you are, because then you wouldn't have those stories.
Right.
To be able to share, to be able to relate, so that people can see that God does make that change, right? So it's kind of like because I've been through tons, but now I have all these stories and where God came in and changed everything, right? Like there's some people that look at Christianity like, oh, well, of course they went to Christianity. They were like the worst of the worst, or they're at their rock bottom. Like, well, then where else would they come to Christ? How else do you find him?
Yeah.
Tell me what you think of this. There was a guy, this pastor who was helping out, and he was kind of mentoring me for a little bit, and his name was Jack Dorlag. And I was expressing that I was a little frustrated with where I was pastoring at the church because all these people just grew up in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm not so sure they ever made some sort of decision here.
Yeah.
They're just kind of been doing it all their lives. Like there was even a lady there who was in her 70s who had never evangelized in her life. She didn't even know how to do it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like I was expressing this to him and he goes, look, in life, there are the Pauls, right, who have this dramatic change and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, the problem is that you're kind of like that. You had that thing. But then there are the Timothys who just grew up with it with their grandma and their mom. And they are, but then you don't see that. Like, where was Timothy's conversion?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then there are also these Peters who are all in, but they're always messing up all the time, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, so you got to look at it like,
yeah,
there's different personalities here, and God loved them all, and God used them all.
yes,
Right?
yeah, yeah. And I think that's like, again, what blows my mind is that he does have a plan for all of us, and we're a part of furthering his kingdom. And that to me is like such a humbling realization that, again, like you just, Paul and Timothy and like God used all of them.
Yeah.
It's like they were just normal men, and God had a plan for them, and then just like,
Yeah, because I mean, we have to be able to see people that same way, I think, right?
yes.
Like the way that God sees them. Okay, well, you're a Peter, and you know, because one would say like, oh, Peter denied him, and then look, he preached on the day of Pentecost and 3,000 people. But everybody forgets that even later, he fought with Paul about because he was like shying away, and there was a whole other ordeal still going on, right?
Yep.
Where it was still, oh yeah, it's Peter, right?
Yeah,
There goes Peter again, kind of thing. Yeah, and we forget that, and then we lose sometimes patience for people, or we don't have that, and sometimes you just meet someone and you try to share the gospel, something like that. And then you maybe never see them again. But there are those that are in your life, like from when you're 15, 16 years old, that you're the only Jesus they might ever see.
Yep.
And you're in that whole witnessing thing for the long haul.
Yep.
Right?
For sure. Yep.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of people in our lives that way.
Yeah, us too. So we don't, in our office, a lot of us are Christians. And so we don't I don't market that. I don't like to market Jesus.
Right, yeah.
Like that's odd. But I'll certainly bring them up when it makes sense. Like just a normal conversation. And we had a prospect come in one time, and she asked like how my story went from nursing into finances. And I was like, well, God called me and I followed. And they were not believers, which is completely fine. We've got some in our office that are not believers, but I think she goes, oh, well, just to let you know, like, we don't believe. I said, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to get up and like preach a sermon. It's totally fine. If you don't believe, we'll love you just the same. Yeah. But I think for them, I think we lost that prospect because of that. And
they just didn't like that you said that.
I don't think they liked that I brought up God. And I was talking with my coworker, and she was kind of disappointed because she really liked the couple, and I did too. And I said, but you know what? They weren't. I'm not going to hide that part of me to make a sale or to like always make people, I don't want to say feel comfortable, but like if he comes up in conversation, he comes up in conversation. Well, like I'm not going to hide him.
And they asked, like, what else would you say?
Right.
Like, if that's the reason, that's the reason. Right?
Yeah.
So how did that happen? So here you are, and you worked so hard in college, and now you're, well, first of all, take me through what a day looks like when you're nursing in places like that, because it's
So and it depends. Like a lot of people, I worked nights when I was on the adult unit, and a lot of people think that it's going to be slower on nights or quieter. People go bananas at nighttime. Like it's called sundowners. The people go bananas. And so it was like herding cats sometimes, because I worked on that neuro unit. And so if it wasn't a stroke patient or it wasn't someone with epilepsy, if they didn't know like what to do with this psych patient, they'd send them to us. Oh. And we've got some family history with like schizophrenia. And so like I've been around that. So again, like I got a compassion for it. But at nighttime, like people they get busier. It's crazy. I had this one lady, she was so sweet. She had dementia, and so she didn't know where she was. And she would perk up at night, and I would put on her program for her, which is like reruns of Little House on the Prairie. And what I did is she wanted to be helpful. And so I would take some of our washcloths and I would put them in a pile for her, and she would fold them and put them over here. And then I would sneak around and unfold them and put them back over here. And she's like, you guys sure do have a lot of towels. I'm so glad I can help.
Oh my
I just
gosh.
wanted to keep her busy, like keep her hands busy away from her IV,
Right.
away from like the buttons. But it
What a
was
thoughtful thing to do.
her or
No,
me?
you.
Oh.
Yeah. No, what you did. No, yeah, folding towels. Yeah.
I wanted to make her feel useful, and she did. It was so sweet. She told her daughter about it the next day. She's like, I was helpful here.
That's so cool.
So, yeah. But I forgot your question already.
Just like a day.
A day,
yeah.
a day. So it is, a lot of it is just, I think my most important role as a nurse was getting to know the patient so I could see a change. So I had a lady who the first 2 days I had her, they call it A&O times 3. So she knew where she was, knew her name, knew the year. Come the third day, she didn't know any of those things. That's a huge, significant change,
Whoa.
right? And so I'm calling the next provider on call. I'm like, hey, this lady. And he's like, well, no, it's because of XYZ. I'm like, it doesn't, maybe. Okay. And I sat with that for about a half an hour, and it's like, no, that's not right. So I called again, and he gave me another reason why. Like, it makes sense that she's confused. And I was like, no, but I've been with this lady for 2 days. This is a significant change. And this is his first night he'd been with her.
Okay.
So for me, advocating for my patients, huge. So I went around this provider up the next step, up the next level, which if you're going to call that doctor who's asleep,
Yeah.
you better have a good reason for it. So I called this doctor and I was like, hey, she was alert and coherent for 2 days. Now she's not. Here's a possible reason that I'm getting. In my gut, something's going on. And so he called in for an MRI. She had a stroke.
Oh my.
But she had some damage, but we caught it as early as we could because, again, like I don't want to like toot my own horn, but like if you take the time to get to know people, you can realize when those changes are significant and act on it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was just like not only, passing meds and doing vital signs and all of that, but just like getting an understanding of who those people are so you could see if something bigger was happening.
And how do you get to know them? So, I mean, because you still have your shifts, right? It's not like you're there 24/7 with them the whole time. But
yeah. So what was nice about our unit and how we were staffed is we were properly staffed, patient to nurse ratio. So that obviously helps a lot. But then on night shift, like there's not as many, doctors coming in and out. There's not as many, tests that are being run. So you do have a little bit more time to sit with people. And that's just like, it's so, the moments I remember most from nursing that were most, I think, impactful for me were those quiet moments, sitting with people. This one guy, he had a stroke and he wasn't able to find his words. And so that he could think of the word. He just couldn't say it, express it. And so I sat with him and I'm not a patient person. My husband is like, you are so patient with your patients. Why can't you bring that home to us? But I sat with him for 10 minutes while he tried to get a word out. Just being patient. And the next week when I got on shift, I saw him walking. He goes, Stephanie! And he had all of his words back.
Wow.
And he was so excited to share that with me. But I remember just sitting with him in the dark at night, waiting for him to get those words out. And it made such a difference. Like it impacted him, just being present.
Yeah. I remember my mother-in-law had a stroke and we could not figure out, she kept saying something about these clinics and she couldn't get her words out. She couldn't do any of that. And she used to be a doctor. So it was kind of interesting for her to say, she calls us, she tells us exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. But she was like a doctor in Mexico and stuff. She's like, I think she told us, hey, so I think I had a stroke. I think I need to go to the hospital, but slowly it's going to decline and I need you to hurry up, come here. And so we had to go across town. This was in El Paso, Texas. Yeah. It takes us like 30 minutes to get there. And she didn't want to go in an ambulance and the whole thing. But anyway, so she's in there and now she's trying to tell us something about this Kleenex. And I wish there was like a happy ending to that story where she finally remembered and told us, but we couldn't. And she was so frustrated and I felt so bad. And I can't even imagine that you saw that almost daily, things like that. And how does that affect you?
There were days where, because my husband Christopher used to pick me up and drop me off at work. There were days where Christopher would pick me up with like a pint of ice cream because it was such a hard day. But I think, again, like it's such an honor. It was such an honor to be there at people's darkest moments and like really hard moments, just to be a source of light. If you can be in those situations sometimes, but just be a source of light for those people and help them out in that way.
So what is the one thing you don't miss about it, about being a nurse?
The bodily fluids. Is that gross? Can I say that on your podcast? There were some days where I would come home from work and just like, I could not get clean enough. Well, especially like, God bless the neuro patients, you know, if there's a stroke or if you've got a mental illness, sometimes you're not always aware of what you're doing. And so they're just sometimes like, oh, okay, this is happening. I'm like, okay, but that I don't miss. But
so how did that transition happen? Like at one point where you started to look into financial planning, how did that even work?
I know. And this, I think, is a complete, truly like act of God. So I was in nursing, end all be all, loved so much about it. And my husband and I went up to Traverse City for the weekend, and there was just one night I could not sleep for the life of me because it just struck me like a bolt of lightning. Like, I think I want to change jobs, and I'm very much a give me my goal, tell me the steps, I'll get it. Like I'm type A personality for sure. And so for me to completely pivot and go a different direction, not knowing at all what the path would be, what I was doing, and have a sense of peace about it. For me, like that was just completely God, because if I don't, with nursing school, if I didn't have my ducks in a row, I was an anxious Annie. But again, for me, just to walk away from that and go into something totally different with a sense of peace, that was just, I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing.
Was there like a transition? Did you have to learn that while you were nursing again? Did you become that person again?
This is so, I would be studying. So in the NICU, you don't really want to touch your patients a lot, especially if they're really premature babies. You would just want to give them a quiet environment, not a lot of stimulation, acting as if they're still in the womb. So when I would do my assessments or do whatever with the patient, and sometimes I'd be at a 1-to-1 ratio, so like that was my only patient for the day. I would sit in the room and be studying for my life insurance license while I was at it. So I did do a little bit of like double dipping. But it was, and it was so interesting to me. Again, I love taking the unknown to the known, because I didn't know a single thing about finance. As far as like investments and insurance and all that, I didn't know a single thing. But
so how did you pick that specifically?
Yeah, so actually my dad works in financial advising.
Oh, okay.
And so for a long time, he was always like, oh, you should get into this. You'd be really good at it. And I was like, Dad, I'm not supposed to be doing that, right? Like I always thought nursing was supposed to be it. I'm like, that's not supposed to be my bag. But I think I shared a story on that last podcast I was on, and how that I feel like a lot of nurses will back me up on this, that I feel like some of those larger hospital systems are getting in the way of the heart of nursing. And that's why the majority of us go into that profession, right? Like military, don't go in unless you got a heart for it, right? That's why a lot of us go into that profession, is because we want to just help people and help their families. And so I have, unfortunately, a handful of stories of me being able to provide that for clients, but then getting a hand slapped for it. And so I was so disappointed and frustrated about that, because I couldn't really get to know and truly help them how I thought they needed to be helped. And when I was making my decision on whether or not, I think I'm going to always follow God. Rule number one is make my decision to follow him. I went to a client event that my parents had, because my dad's like I said, in the industry. And all of these people were coming into this client event, and I had never met them before, but they were coming up to me and my husband and like, oh, We heard you had the wedding a couple years ago. How was it? And they're asking me all these questions because they knew me, because they knew my family. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like, I got excited. I'm like, this is going to be it. I'm going to be able to take, educating patients, and I'm educating clients, and I get to love on these patients. I get to love on these clients. Like it was like the perfect merriment of everything that I really felt like I was supposed to be doing.
So was your dad always doing that when he was pastoring?
Yeah,
right?
he was pastor.
So,
Yep. So God, and it's so weird. He tells people, he's like, nothing crazy happened that I got called out of the ministry. But it's like one of those things that like God called him out of it. And so he followed. But so he did insurance for a while across state, and he was a captured rep. So we're an independent financial advising firm. So if I am working with Charles Schwab and Charles Schwab gets weird, I can go to Fidelity, right? Like I'm not beholden to anybody. I can make whatever decisions is best for my clients. He was a captured rep, which means that he is stuck in what like products or investment vehicles he can offer because he answers to the man, right? To somebody else. Yeah. And there ended up being a lot of conflicts of interest that my dad could not jive with. So they were really pushing a certain product that when my dad really dug into the underbelly of it and the internal costs of it, he's like, I can't in good conscience sell this to people. And they're like, well, too bad. Here's how much product you have to push. And Dad's like, all right, I'm out. So he walked away from that. And then from a pastor going from not a whole lot of money. I don't know if you know this, but they don't make make a whole lot. To go from that to then having, the most money that him and my mom have ever made. But he's like, I can't do this. He couldn't push the products they wanted him to sell. Right. So we all packed up and moved across state once I graduated high school. So because he signed a non-compete, so he couldn't practice in the same area. So we came here across state, and I left a boyfriend, my high school boyfriend at the time. I was so upset, but then he followed me here and we got married.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, well, it worked out because now you're married, but it's the same guy.
No, it's the same guy.
Same guy.
Same guy. I know. And someone once said, like, oh, do you feel like you missed out because you found your husband in high school? I'm like, yeah, I missed out on a lot of baloney or like a lot of baggage, right? Like I got blessed that I found him so early.
I think about that a lot because like I've been divorced, but even then, I've had even girlfriends that were long-term and I thought we were going to get married, all this kind of stuff. And I was like pastoring a youth group at one point and they were kind of asking about that. So I'm like, listen, the best thing you could ever do is not. Yeah. The last thing you want are these weird memories and ghosts that of relationships. Like, what do you want that for? Yeah. And I don't think anybody until you get older no kid's ever going to realize that, like, because that person at that moment is their end all be all.
Exactly.
Kind of thing,
right.
Yeah. Like that's it. Right. Like we're in love and that's it.
And at 16, we're in love.
Yeah. Cause I own Entertain Zone at the Lakes Mall and, we have like teens there and they've got their boyfriends and they tell me their problems sometimes. And, and I feel like, okay, well, I went from pastoring to now I'm like pastoring all the employees kind of a little bit. And at one point I said that to him. I go, well, you could look at it this way. I also thought that at was going to be you're barely 19 years old. Yeah. Like you could not even know this person in 5 years. You wouldn't even know who they are.
Yes. Yeah, and I had a conversation with a friend. I'm like, because my husband and I have been together for almost 20 years, and we've had to intentionally get to know and fall in love with every phase that we grew into, right? Because we knew each other in high school, so Lord knows we were not very mature. And then there's college versions of us, and then there's career versions and parenthood, and we've had to intentionally find each other and connect through each one of those stages.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of your dad and how he was called out of ministry.
Yeah.
Because the same thing happened to me. But because of like what you're saying, pastors don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Unless you're some mega church pastor or something like that.
That's a whole other thing.
It's a whole other kind of business. Yeah, it's a whole other kind of business, right?
Yeah.
but part of it was, so I'm at this church, and the average age is like in the 60s, right? It's a very old church, and I have got all these new ideas because I got this like entrepreneurial spirit thing, right? So um, during COVID, when I couldn't plant the church, I started a TV channel, and that's how I started to make some money. And I thought I want to do something at the mall, so I bought these animal rides, and I was working there, running that little business out of there in like 2021 or 22, something like that. And I realized a couple of things. I was like, wait a minute. I went to school and I studied so hard and I got like my master's in theology and all this kind of thing. I'm like, wait.
So did my dad, yeah.
And you have all these things, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm getting more fulfilled being out here meeting young families, making kids smile, the whole.
And then so for my dad, he's like, well, did he almost felt, I'm maybe putting words in his mouth, but he felt bad that he was getting fulfilled in other places when he's like, shouldn't it be where God started me out as, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have that like weird martyr guilt kind of thing. But I've found that I've been able to fulfill my calling more being outside of it, because there's so many blessings that have come. I remember my father-in-law said, you don't have any idea how many people have been blessed by you just moving up to Michigan.
Yeah.
Just that alone.
Yep.
And everything else that the lives you get to touch. And now, like, my family is financially better off, obviously. But also now I get to give more into like ministry projects and all these other things that I wouldn't be able to do.
Yep.
So it's a different kind of calling, but it's a little more fulfilling because you get to do what you're supposed to do. And it's not the, you said you had opinions. I also have opinions about big old mega church things, right? I don't, it's not like, oh, name it and claim it and you have this money, nothing like that. It's more like, somebody asked me actually, and it was somebody that actually was trying to sell me something, but then we started talking, and it turns out this kid was a Christian too, and you could tell he's like in this call center kind of thing. And he asked me, how did you do it? Because like you're like Christian and I'm a Christian too. I just want to tell you, how did you get to where you are? And I'm like, I think it started to work for me when I stopped chasing the money for myself, and I started chasing more like ways that I could be able to give. Right. So in my heart, like we do this thing in Juarez, Mexico, where we give toys to these kids that are either like single parented, orphan, that kind of thing. And they're like in poverty there every Christmas. Right. And we want to kind of build that up. And I'm like, well, I'm not able to do that on this pastor salary. So I'm like, what if I do this? And then we put this money here. And when you start chasing like more resources for other things, for things that God wants you to do, and then all of a sudden he can trust you with that money, and then it's blessed, right? Like he knows that I'm going to give it away. At one point there was like, well, why is this influx coming in? And then all of a sudden there was a need at a church. And I'm like, oh, that's why.
Oh, I know. He makes it so obvious sometimes, which I'm thankful for. He doesn't always.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we've had clients come in, I should say prospects come in. And one of the things that drives me bananas is when people are not good stewards of their money. And I don't mean that like they're making decisions that they don't know the true consequences of, or they don't fully understand what's going on, but more of like they get sloppy with their money because they have so much of it. And that to me, it's so hard for me to, I don't want to say stomach that. That sounds very dramatic, but it's not my favorite, because whether or not you worked really hard for it or you were gifted it, I believe it's from God. Like that's from him to do further good works. And because I've known a lot of people who've worked really hard their whole entire life and they don't have the zeros that you have. And so that to me is probably like my biggest pet peeve in my industry, is that when people have a lot of zeros and they're sloppy with it, and they're fine with being sloppy with it. And I'm like, oh man, you could help so many people.
I know, right?
With this money.
Yeah.
And like I know for like us and my husband, we can give money away. Like that brings us so much joy. It's so great.
Well, and at one point, and I've never been able to express this correctly, and I probably won't be able to do this now, but when you read in Matthew, when Jesus says, when you clothed the naked and you visited the person in jail and you fed the hungry and all stuff, like that's it says that if you've done it unto me.
Yeah.
And the way that I remember this one time, this one deacon at the church was like, there's nothing going on here. Like, I don't feel the Lord here. When I went on a missions trip, I felt the Lord. I'm like, well, yeah, because when you were doing that, it's as though you were doing it under Christ. You'd feel his presence more.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that joy comes in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're actually doing it unto him, really, right? And it's just so fascinating to me. Like, once you find that, you don't want to stop doing that. Like, I'll work really hard to get more to do that, if that makes sense.
It does. No, it completely does. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that, like, just because you're not like in the church or that's not your job, that you can't do that. Right. So like, again, when I'm sitting down with clients, like I have talents, I have knowledge, I have resources that came from him to give, you know?
Yeah.
And there's been some days where like, my coworker was really discouraged the other day. And I was like, you know, and he was just discouraged going into a meeting. And I said, no, let's have a good attitude. God gave you talents. Let's go use them. Let's go help these people. And so just even that little like pivot and switching and realizing that like everything I do is for his glory. It brings joy into what you might think would just be kind of a mundane meeting, but it brings the joy into it.
So I know that you're not very, like you can't be sometimes just outspoken about what you just said, what they should be doing with their money. So how do you guide people in that?
It really helps when I say, okay, I'm not going to be a dictator of your money, but here's my advice. You know, you pay me for my advice and here it is. So do you mean specifically with people being sloppy?
Yeah, I guess.
With their money? Yeah. Typically we don't jive with those people. So what's really nice about being an independent is we can choose who we want to work with. So it's true when I say when people come in to meet with us and kick our tires, we're kicking their tires too.
Okay.
And so we've had people that have had a lot of zeros, but they're sloppy or their attitudes are just bummers and we don't have to work with them. And that is amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
What a relief, right?
It sounds bad. It sounds so bad. But like, again, if I've got somebody that has, $30 million and they're just wasting it, that's not going to bring me joy, right? That's not going to make me feel good because I just think of how many people that can help. Gosh, so we're fortunate in that area that the clients that we have, they're very like-minded in that they want to be wise with their money. The money itself doesn't bring them joy, rather what they can do with it, whether it's like trips with their kids or to help, their kids buy a house or giving money away to churches. Like that's what brings them the joy. And so we're very aligned that way.
Yeah. I was going to ask, what do you consider being wise with your money is? Like,
Okay. Well, I would say being wise living within your means. That is, I think social media does not help this, but it's created this culture of overconsumption. And, that person has 50 Stanley cups. Well, I want to have 5 of them. They're a reusable cup. You only need one.
Right.
You don't need all these things. But I think that we've just become a culture of overconsumption. And, we have a ton of student loan debt, but we're still going to go on a humongous trip every single year. Probably shouldn't do that, right? So I think that a lot of times people will see other lavish lifestyles posted online and think like, well, I can do that too. I'll just put it on a credit card. Don't do that.
Well, yeah, you see all these like either reels or TikToks or anything like that, and it's kind of like, look at how nice that person's life is.
Yes.
Oh, they're traveling again. Oh, they're
yes.
And you're like, and here I am stuck.
I know. It's like snowing for the 3rd time in, the month of March. I have been intentionally with my social media pages making sure I'm following like mom blogs that are real, right? Like they're just being very honest about like, we went on vacation. Here's a beautiful picture, but here's also a picture of my kid having a tantrum, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think our mutual friend Meg Heritage, like when I first sat down with her, and just wanted to get to know her, she's like, hey, I'm going to let you know my life is a mess. And I was like, oh, this woman I can jive with because like I need people just to be real.
Yeah.
And to see things on social media that are not real, it can skew your perception of what your life should be like.
Yeah. Who these people are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it makes you feel bad about your life a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can.
Right?
Yep.
So if you were Speaking of like social media thing, if you were like, oh, here are the top 5 things you should do with your money if you have it.
Oh, no. Come see me.
I know. First of all, call me.
1 through 5.
Yeah, 1 through 5.
I think for a lot of people, they don't realize the power of compounding interest. So I went to a teen challenge and just had like a budgeting meeting with the people there. And I really stressed to them that, budgeting or even investing, you don't have to have X amount of dollars to make an impact on your life. Put away $5 here, put $100 here. Like, just start putting money away, give it time. You're going to see the rewards of that if you can be patient enough. That's my biggest thing, is you got to be patient enough. Right? A lot of people want like that quick fix, that really quick turnaround dopamine hit. And it's like, it's not going to happen like that.
Right.
So I can't give you like a very clean top 5, but I think my biggest thing is like, people just need to start. You just have to start. I've seen a lot of people come into my office that are in their 60s, and I don't want to say they started too late, but they should have started sooner.
Like start investing or
start investing, start saving, and it's even like paying down debts. And it's not fun. Like, it's not fun to pay down your debts. Totally get it. But it just feels so good when you're out of it.
It feels way better when you pay it down.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because I used to have so much, and then you start to pay, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's gone.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's not my credit report's going.
Yeah.
Getting better.
That number's getting better.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who'd have thought,
Yeah. I know. Yeah. But it's that. So, and it depends too, like what stage of life you're in, what advice I'll give you. Right. So like for my 20s and my 30s, start saving now, get your budget in order, start paying down those debts. In my, 60s and retiring, okay, well, we got to look now. Let's look at Social Security. How do you want to take that? Let's give job descriptions to our money. So it's completely different depending on what age group I'm sitting with.
So 40s and 50s?
So 40s and 50s.
I was just, side note, I was just telling Amy, that my assistant here, that everybody's always forgetting about us Gen Xers.
Oh, stop.
Okay, yeah, good.
And then I just did.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No,
okay, so 40s and 50s. So honestly, actually, my sweet spot for people who are retiring, I want to catch them in their 50s. Because, for how many years you're in your accumulation years, we call them, you're just putting money away, you're, burying nuts in the ground for retirement.
Yeah.
But then when you get to we call them your distribution years in retirement, that's a completely different shift, right? Like, now you're on the hook for essentially recreating your own paycheck.
Right.
Or like with a Social Security decision, like once you make that decision and you have it for a year, you can't take it back. So there's so many different ways you can take it. You got to think about that too. And a lot of people don't think that Social Security, when you elect it in your retirement years, the way you elect it could make hundreds of thousands of dollars of a difference in a cumulative benefit, depending on how you take it.
Oh, wow.
And think about it. Like, that's we've put money into that for how long?
All our lives,
All our lives. Like, let's get the most out of it. I don't think it's going to be around when I retire. That's my cynical.
I don't think so either. But
that's my cynical view. So I always stress to people, I'm like, if not for you, please do it for me, because I'm putting money into this. Get the most out of it for you. But
gosh, yeah. Well, I have so many questions about that. But if anybody wants to know about that, they should just call you.
Yeah.
You can't be giving out free advice on my podcast.
Well, no, I don't, because I always say I go back to my medical world of like, I can't just give somebody a recommendation on a drug without knowing everything, right? That's medical malpractice. I can't just be like, yeah, go ahead and take that statin drug for your cholesterol without knowing other things. Same thing with financial advice.
You don't want to do financial malpractice.
No, I can't just start spouting things off and hope for the best. Like, that's no, it's negligent.
Wow. So what's the difference been like, just as we wrap up, but what's the difference been like in how you feel fulfilled?
Yeah.
Well, and something I forgot to ask you too is, on a dime, you just kind of like, I want to change jobs, but where was God in that? Did you pray? Did you feel like he was pushing you in that direction? And then do you feel more fulfilled now than you did then, or same, or how?
Yeah, I think, so I think, again, it was like a lightning strike, like, oh, I think I want to do this. And then I sat with it. And and it was literally in the middle of the night, so I could have the be still moments, and I was just thinking about it and praying about it. And again, I got such a sense of peace of that decision. And I was pretty fresh out of nursing school in the grand scheme of things, right? I was only a few years out. So being so at peace with that decision, I'm a little bit more of an anxious person. And so having that, it only could have come from him. So that was it was pretty confirming for me that that's what I needed to do. I am more fulfilled now in this role. Not only can I carry over the things like educating people and caring for, I can truly care for my clients as a whole. So I don't just know them, I know their kids, right? And some of the goals that they want to have for their grandchildren. And it's just real, it's awesome. I love my job. And what's also really great is that I think I can be a better mother or a more present mother because of the job that I have and the flexibility that it offers. And what's so wonderful too is that we've built this awesome client base, and these people are asking me about my kids. Like, they'll specifically ask me by name, like, how's Jack doing? You know, they know my children. And so there's been a couple times where there's been an emergency, and I've had to reschedule an appointment because a kid got sick or what have you. And I don't like rescheduling on people. It makes, I did that to you once. Like, I felt bad. Like, I don't like rescheduling, but it happens. But all of our clients are like, no, that's okay. Like, go take care of your family. And that's so in so many areas of my life, I'm able to fulfill my calling because I made this switch, which I also think was obviously a part of God's plan too, is that I could be a more present mom because of this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Gosh, it was so great talking to you.
Yes, you too.
I'm gonna have you back again because there's plenty to talk about. So.
Yeah.
I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface of things, and I think a lot of people need to hear stories like yours so they understand that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world, or it's not weird, or you shouldn't feel anxious about like maybe God's pushing this into your life. Right? Like there's a new way and that he wants you to help people. Yeah. Right? Yep. And I think your story is awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being. Oh, wait, before you go, what is how do people get a hold of you if you're looking for clients?
They can look us up on Strategic Financial Group out here in Grand Haven, or email me at sg@strategicfg.net, which is kind of a mouthful. So
tongue twister.
Probably just look us up online.
We'll put it right here.
Yeah, thank you.